are back to continue our discussion of embedded clauses, and we're going to talk a little bit about the possibility of having an embedded clause within the subject position of the sentence. So these are what we call sentential subjects. Sentential subjects just means that within a main clause, you have within the subject position, the subject itself is another clause. And so, of course, that's going to be an embedded clause. Why? Because it's occurring inside of the whole main clause. So whether you have, as in the examples that we talked about before with the adjectives and the verbs, the embedded clause occurring within the predicate of the sentence as the complement to the verb or the complement to the adjective, they're both occurring within the predicate. In this instance, the embedded clause is occurring within the subject position. So we're going to have a very different structure for this one. So the adjectival and the verbal complements look very similar structurally, and this is going to look a little bit different. But first, we want to think about what is the possibility of having a sentence serving as the subject of another sentence. So, for example, if you say that Mary is proud was claimed by Phyllis. Okay, that Mary is proud was claimed by Phyllis. Think about what's going on in this sentence. We have really just a traditional sentence comprised of a subject and a predicate. Why? Because if we think about, for this whole sentence, the whole main clause, what is the subject of the sentence? Well, is the subject of this sentence Mary? Actually, Mary is a subject, but Mary is the subject of the predicate is proud. Mary is not the subject of the predicate was claimed by Phyllis, because then the meaning would be something like Mary was claimed by Phyllis. But that's not the meaning that we have here, right? The subject of the sentence, the thing that the sentence is about, the topic, is actually that Mary is proud. So this whole thing, that Mary is proud, is serving as the subject of the sentence. But what's unusual about this is that we typically see a noun phrase serving as the subject of the sentence. So typically you see something like John and Mary left the room. John and Mary are serving as the subject of the sentence. Even if you have something that carries no meaning, we talked about the expletive constructions in English. So if you say something like it is raining, the it is counting as a noun phrase because it's a type of pronoun. Or if you have the construction with there are 5 men in the room, something like that, there is serving as the subject of the sentence. Even though it doesn't have any meaning, it's still identified as a noun phrase. So if we want to keep this idea that a sentence is always comprised of a subject noun phrase and a predicate, which is a verb phrase, we have to think about what are we going to do with these sentences where we seem to have within the subject position a whole other sentence, right? So that Mary is proud was claimed by Phyllis. If you thought about analyzing this sentence and not thinking about what you're going to do specifically with the sentential subject, but just analyzing the sentence as a whole, well, you know that the subject of the sentence needs to be a noun phrase. So you know that Mary is proud somehow has to be a noun phrase for sure. And then you've got was claimed by Phyllis. This is the predicate of the sentence, so you know that this has to be a verb phrase. There's no other option, right? So this somehow has to be a verb phrase, and together they are forming the whole sentence, the whole main clause. So that will always, always, always be the case. And as long as we keep that in mind, then the analysis of the sentential subjects becomes a little bit more clear. So if we think about what is going on here, that Mary is proud. Why are we saying we have a sentential subject? Because we have within the subject something that looks like a sentence. Why does it look like a sentence? Because it's comprised of a subject and a predicate. So what are those pieces here? If you look at that Mary is proud, Mary is the subject of that embedded clause, and is proud is the predicate of that embedded clause. Now it's an embedded clause within the subject, but it's still an embedded clause because it's a clause that is occurring within a larger clause. Within the whole main clause that Mary is proud was claimed by Phyllis. So the idea is that here we have something that looks like a sentence and we want to say it has the structure of a sentence. So let's do that by giving this structure. So you have that Mary is proud. Mary is your subject. It's going to be the noun phrase. And then is proud is your predicate. It's going to be a verb phrase. And these two are going to form the sentence as always. That will always be the case whenever you have a sentence. Noun phrase plus verb phrase. And then we have this familiar that, right? Remember that we talked about that as being a complementizer? And when you have that complementizer, it's forming a unit with the item that follows it. And it's telling you that the item that is following it is going to be a sentence. So we said that you can add the complementizer and consider this to be an S-bar. However, if we had just that amount of structure for this sentence, things would still be puzzling, right? Because we said that it's always the case that a sentence is comprised of a noun phrase and a verb phrase. So if this were our main clause, noun phrase, that Mary is proud, that would be a little bit strange because that Mary is proud doesn't look like a noun phrase. Was claimed by Phyllis, that does look like a predicate, it looks like a verb phrase, so that would be problematic. So what are we going to do when we have these sentential subjects is we have to identify them as being noun phrases. In other words, they get relabeled at the level of the S or the S-bar into a noun phrase to show that they're functioning as real subjects in the sentence. And then, of course, you're going to have your verb phrase structure over here, including all of the material that occurs after the subject of the sentence. So the idea about the sentential subjects is that they are embedded clauses that occur within the subject position of a main clause. They have the identical structure as all embedded clauses do to every clause that we've talked about in the sense that they're comprised of a subject and a predicate. And what's interesting about sentential subjects is that although usually you can have the complementizer that in English or you can not have it, you can leave it out. When you have a sentential subject, it sounds really weird if you don't include the complementizer. So if you say, Mary is proud was claimed by Phyllis. Mary is proud was claimed by Phyllis. This just sounds like a really unnatural sentence because you want to have the complementizer that present. But that's unusual, right? Because we saw with the adjectives and the verbs that when you have an embedded clause with that, that is optional. So this is one difference between adjective clauses, verb phrase clauses, and sentential subject clauses. Sentential subject clauses require the complementizer. Okay, so let's look at a few more examples where we're going to have something that looks like it is a whole sentence within the subject position of the sentence. So, if you have something like that Martha fixed the problem was depressing. Okay, that Martha fixed the problem was depressing. How do we know that this whole thing is serving as a clause? Because we have the two component parts that we need to have for any clause, which is subject and predicate. So that Martha fixed the problem seems to be functioning as our subject. It's what the sentence is about. It's the topic of the sentence. And what's going on with was depressing, that's giving a comment on the subject of the sentence that Martha fixed the problem, and so it's serving as a subject complement for the subject of the sentence. So the whole type of verb group that you would have here for the main clause would be in intensive. You have a subject complement describing the subject of the sentence. So let's take a look at what is going to happen from the top down. Whenever you have a sentence, which you certainly do have here, you know 100% that that's going to be comprised of a noun phrase subject and a verb phrase predicate. So this amount of structure is guaranteed to be present, given that you have a sentence here. So you could say, okay, that Martha fixed the problem was depressing. And this would be the correct analysis in terms of the basic sentence structure of this whole main clause. So your whole main clause comprised of subject and predicate is going to be that Martha fixed the problem. And now you want to think about, okay, for this example, what is serving as the embedded clause? And you can see that unlike the other examples where the embedded clause occurred within the predicate, in this example, the embedded clause occurs within the subject of the sentence. But it's still a clause within a clause, right? So that's why it is still an embedded clause. So we want to think about what is the internal structure of that embedded clause. So we pick out our embedded clause, Martha fixed the problem. We know for sure this is an embedded clause because you could have had it occurring by itself. You could walk up to somebody and say, Martha fixed the problem. That would be a perfectly fine sentence. Therefore, we know that whatever we do with this structure, we have to give the typical sentence structure assignment to that part of the sentence. Martha fixed the problem must be a regular sentence of English. So, what are the two components of that regular sentence of English? The subject and the predicate. These two are forming a sentence. And remember that since when we have a sentential subject, we're required to have the complementizer that. It's not optional anymore. With the other two constructions, you could have the complementizer or you could leave it out. It didn't matter for the meaning, but with this particular construction, you need to have it. So given that you have the complementizer, you're going to necessarily have a level of S bar. Think about S bar as just being a sentence plus a little bit more. A sentence plus a complementizer. It will always be a complementizer. And then the idea is that, well, we know that the subject of every sentence has to be a noun phrase. So we're going to provide a structure for this sentence plus a little bit more, the S bar, as a noun phrase, thereby allowing it to fit into the pattern of what a subject can be. A subject can always and always, always only be a noun phrase. And then everything over here is going to stay the same because we're just giving the basic structure of the predicate. Okay, so the idea is that when you have a subject which itself contains an embedded clause, that is what we call a sentential subject, and you're going to have the same analysis for that construction that you have for all other embedded clauses. The embedded clause part of the structure is just a regular sentence comprised of a noun phrase and a verb phrase, and since you need to have a complementizer here, you don't have the option of not having a complementizer, that is going to join in to create something a little bit bigger than a sentence, which is going to be S bar. And because we know for sure 100%, the only thing that can serve as the subject of a sentence is a noun phrase, we're going to think about that S bar as being reanalyzed as a noun phrase so that it can be in the subject position. So let's think about a couple of more examples. That the party was canceled is unbelievable. Okay, so we have a sentence that the party was canceled is unbelievable. Notice that these sentential subject sentences are not as common as the other type of embedded clause structure. So it's quite common to have a main verb taking an embedded clause as its complement, and it's pretty common to have an adjective taking an embedded clause as its complement. However, when we have these sentential subjects, usually they occur in particular environments. They're less frequent. However, even though they're less frequent, we have intuitions about the fact that we have to have the complementizer there. Even though it's not something that is very productive, everyone agrees that they need to be constructed of a complementizer plus a whole sentence. So that the party was canceled is unbelievable. You're going to first think about in terms of necessarily main clause, subject, noun, phrase, predicate, verb, phrase, and then you're going to think, okay, the main clause is, what is it always? Only everything within the entire sentence. Miriam, close the door, mommy. So that the party was canceled is unbelievable. We're going to label as our main clause. And then we're going to look within this main clause and say, what is the embedded clause part? The party was canceled. Aha. The party was canceled. That could have occurred as an independent sentence. I could come up to you and say, hey, guess what? I have news for you. The party was canceled. In that case, the party was canceled is forming its own independent clause. So the party was canceled must be analyzed as an embedded clause. It's a clause because it's comprised of a subject and predicate, and it's an embedded clause because it occurs within another clause. So we're going to first look at the structure for the embedded clause, and that's always what you want to do when dealing with embedded clauses of any type, whether you have a verb, an adjective, a sentential subject. First identify the main clause, next identify the embedded clause, then provide the structure for the embedded clause as if there is no main clause there, as if that is the main clause, the embedded clause, because it's following exactly the same rules and processes as we have for talking about main clauses. So the idea is that we want to isolate out the party was canceled, forget about everything else in the sentence, we want to forget about that and is unbelievable, and just think about what are we doing with that structurally. So the party was canceled must be comprised of a subject and a predicate, and you can see here that the subject is the party, it's the topic of the sentence, so this is going to be our noun phrase subject. And then what about was canceled? Was canceled is giving you information about the party. So it's describing something about the party. In other words, it's the predicate of the sentence and is therefore comprised of the verb phrase. Remember that when we're doing structures with embedded clauses, we don't have to worry about exactly what's happening with the internal structure of the verb phrase. You don't have to think about, okay, what is the verb group and what is canceled? Is canceled the main verb? Was the main verb? You would have all of these questions if you were looking at the internal structure of the verb phrase. But for this, we're just going to assume this is the verb phrase. That's it. That's all we need to say. And of course, then these two guys together form the sentence, which is the embedded clause. Whenever you have a complementizer that, it must be forming a unit with a following sentence. That's the function that it has. So you can label the that complementizer and form what we're calling an S-bar, which is a little bit more than just a sentence structure. And then the idea is that this S-bar is transformed into a noun phrase so that it can serve as the subject of the main clause. So, of course, the predicate, in terms of the main clause, is just going to be everything about that sentential subject. So the verb phrase is going to be made up of is unbelievable. That's going to be the only thing that you need to worry about in terms of the internal structure. We're not going to think about, okay, so we have is as the main verb, unbelievable serving as an adjective phrase. This is the subject complement, it's going to be intensive, etc. The only thing you're thinking about is how to divide up into subject and predicate. And then the other parts of the exams where we look at the internal structure of the verb phrase, the internal structure of the verb group, that's where you're going to ask the questions about what is going on within those units. So, let's look at one more example where we have a sentential subject, and let's just think about and review the general ideas about embedded clauses by looking at this example. So if you have a sentence like, that the pasta was ready was obvious. Notice that whenever you have a sentential subject, you always have another way of saying the sentence, which is that when you say something like that the pasta was ready was obvious, you could always have said it was obvious that the pasta was ready. And what type of structure is that? That's when we have the adjectival phrase. So we have the adjective taking the embedded clause as its complement. So you're going to have a counterpart for each sentential subject where you have a completely different structure. It's just going to be an adjectival phrase. So that the pasta was ready was obvious is going to be our whole main clause. It's all of the material in a sentence. We're going to mark this off as the main clause so that we can think about, okay, what are the two pieces of this main clause? It must be comprised of the subject noun phrase and the predicate verb phrase. So what is going to be the subject of the sentence? What is the topic of the sentence? What is the sentence about? Is that the pasta was ready. And really it's a sense of an abbreviation for something like the idea that the pasta was ready, or the pasta being ready, the concept of the pasta being ready. So that the pasta was ready must be serving as the noun phrase subject. Was obvious must be serving as the predicate for the main clause. And then we ask ourselves, okay, so we know that inside this sentence we have not only the main clause, we have the whole structure, but we have, as well in this example, an embedded clause. What tells us that is that whenever you have a clause, you have two things, a subject and a predicate. So, looking at this example, the pasta was ready, you could see that the pasta was ready is going to be the embedded clause. It's not necessary for you when you're providing your tree structures to identify overtly what the main clause is and what the embedded clause is, but it's really, really, really helpful when you're doing your analysis to have clarified that. So if you want to provide brackets and label embedded clause and main clause, that will help you very much in providing the structure. So, the pasta was ready is itself a sentence. I could have said to you, hey, the pasta's ready. That would be fine as an independent sentence. Therefore, you know that the pasta was ready must be divided up into noun phrase, which is the pasta. The topic of the sentence is the pasta. And then what are you saying about the pasta? You're saying that it was ready. So the predication that you're making of that subject is that it was ready. That's going to be our verb phrase. And together, of course, these form a sentence. And so even if you just had the sentence, the pasta was ready, occurring by itself, it would be exactly identical in structure to what you have here. That's why we say that when we have embedded clauses, there's nothing really new that is going on within the structure. The structure of embedded clauses is just making use of the structure that we're already familiar with from main clauses. It doesn't do anything different. Okay, so we have this S, but now we have this issue of what about the word that, which we know is a complementizer. So we're going to add this as our S bar, our sentence, plus a little bit more information. And that will be the only item that can occur with a sentence to create an S bar, will be the complementizer of that. So together, these form the noun phrase of the sentence. Why do we want to say that? Because we have this idea that the subject of every single sentence is necessarily a noun phrase. And if we were to say that the subject of this sentence is S bar, that would be an exception to that generalization. So we want to say that in this instance, S bar is really analyzed as a noun phrase and is thus able to serve as the subject of the sentence. So the predicate was obvious is being predicated of that whole subject, that the pasta was ready, that idea that the pasta was ready was obvious, that's the meaning, so you would have a subject-complement relationship. Obvious is describing the subject of the sentence. And so the idea is that whenever you have an embedded clause, you will know that you have it because you'll have material that on its own could be a main clause. That's what tells you that you have an embedded clause. And once you know you have an embedded clause, you've got three choices. Either that embedded clause is the complement to a main verb, it's a complement to an adjective, or it's actually serving as the subject of the main clause. When you have the main verb and the adjective structures, basically it's similar to when you have a complement of any sort. So if you have a direct object, if you have an indirect object, the position of the embedded clause is going to be the same as any of those complements of the verb. And the same with an adjective. So if you say, I'm really upset that Miriam is acting so impatient, then in that particular example, that Miriam is acting so impatient is your embedded clause. Miriam is acting so impatient could have been an independent sentence. I could have just said the sentence, Miriam is acting so impatient, right? And so the idea is that what links that embedded clause to the rest of the sentence, I am upset that. So upset is the central meaning connecting the subject with the embedded clause. Upset we know is an adjective because you can say very. I am very upset that Miriam is acting so impatient. So very is an intensifier showing you that upset is actually serving as an adjective. So you have the adjective phrase including the adjective upset plus the embedded clause. And then the structure that is a little bit different is the subject, sentential subjects, where you have within the subject of the sentence a whole clause. But the idea in identifying them is going to be exactly the same. Because how do you know that you have an embedded clause of any type? You see something within the sentence that it itself is a sentence. What does it mean to be a sentence? It means that you have a subject, noun phrase, and a predicate, verb phrase. That's all it means. So when you have a sentential subject, the difference between that and the verbal and adjectival constructions is that instead of occurring within the predicate, we now have this structure within the subject itself. And remember that in English, whenever we have these sentential subjects, we have to have an overt complementizer. So if you were to say, the pasta was ready was obvious, that just sounds like a really weird sentence, right? The pasta was ready was obvious. You would want to say, it would be natural to say that the pasta was ready was obvious. So what does that tell us? That tells us that with a sentential subject, you will always have the S bar unit. The complementizer plus the sentence will always form the S bar unit. And more further than that, that is going to be then represented as a noun phrase. Why? Because the subject of a sentence must be a noun phrase. And then the predicate is going to be everything that you're saying that is commenting on or giving you information about the sentential subject. Okay, so if you guys have questions, please let me know. I'm going to give you a bunch of examples to go through for assignments 9 and 10. Assignment 9 is already up. That's on the main clause structures that we talked about last time. And I'm going to today post the structures that you're going to provide for the embedded clause examples. So remember, those are both due on Thursday night because this is the last week of class. Our class is ending and what I would like you to do between now and then is to look over your notes, look over the material that you have from the book, and review all of the assignments that you've done and ask yourself the question, okay, if this wasn't analyzed correctly, do I now know how to analyze it? Because the final exam is going to be made up of everything from the whole semester. It's going to be made up chiefly of material that was after the first exam, but I'm also going to include material from the first exam. So you want to review all of that as well. And if you have any doubts, if you're not sure why is it that this sentence is analyzed in this way? Or why was it that this analysis was not correct? What happened here? Just get in touch with me, ask me, and then we'll have a review for the final exam. I'll give you basically the structure of the final exam with the types of questions that you'll have, and then I'll send to you the answers so that you can see, go through the final exam on your own, and then compare it with the answers and see how you're doing. If you have questions that come from that, let me know, get in touch. Okay, we'll be seeing you guys. Take care. Bye.